Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to make a little request. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the people out in Atlantic Canada who are watching right now. I hope you enjoy this, and if there's any resource or anything that we utilize today in this session here that you want to use, please reach out. We can send those resources to you. Also, what I'd like to ask, because some of you are sitting on your own in smaller groups, is I'm going to ask everyone at the back tables to join a table. Just the ones that don't have as many people there, like that one there. Because some of the activities that we're going to do during this session, because it is a bit hands-on, might be helpful to have everyone there. So I just want to mention that I'm the education training specialist, and I joined, as Grace mentioned, in 2017, and it's been an absolute honor to be working at Parkinson Canada. I honestly love what I do, and I love the organization and what they do. So I really hope that you will reach out to us, and we can certainly do whatever we can to help you through your journey. And so, just to tell you a little bit about me, you can see a bunch of things that, I am, or at least I feel I am. So many of you, in a lot of ways, may be people who are wearing many of the same hats or playing many of the same roles that I play. But most importantly, I am a caregiver, a care partner for someone, albeit not for someone with Parkinson's, but I've been a sole care provider to someone for 17 years. And it's been an absolute challenge in many ways, and yet I have to be honest, I don't think I was prepared when I started, and I'm still learning very much. So today I'm going to talk to you about caring and giving. Finding balance in a life that sometimes tilts in many different directions. And have you ever been in that moment where you felt like the ground was almost being pulled out from under you? Yeah. So I think that's why I chose the title, because I've been there and I know what that feels like. And it's so hard finding something to grab onto that helps you stabilize yet again and find your balance. So I'm hoping that today we can equip you with some skills, some tools, and things like that that will help. So we're going to talk about care partner statistics. We're going to look at assessing the burden and the challenges. We're going to look at emotions, fatigue, and forgiveness. Big word. We talk about guilt a lot, but I want to talk about forgiveness. And I want to talk about self-care planning and finding that balance. So after this presentation, hopefully we'll have a great deal of understanding. We'll identify some things that we need, and we'll assess our care partner burden, and finally prepare a self-care plan. So I like this quote from Rollo May, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's an existential psychologist, and he's actually written a lot of books. So if you Google it, you'll find a list of books that he's written. He's well known. And he says care is a state in which something does matter. It is the source of human tenderness. Now, Tia Walker, who is a care partner and blogger, says that caregiving often calls us to lean into love we didn't even know existed, basically, or didn't know was possible. And of course, Edward Albert. If you're of a certain generation, you'll know who Edward Albert is. He's an actor. And he says that the simple act of caring is heroic. But oftentimes, caregivers are the castleties, the hidden victims. No one sees the sacrifices that they make. As Grace mentioned earlier, she said they're kind of like the stage hands or the stage crew for any kind of a production. They're kind of behind the scenes. We are often behind the scenes. And so that's something that has a terminology that Grace also mentioned, and our next speaker will be talking about that. But I want to talk about care partner statistics. What does that look like here in Canada? Because I was absolutely surprised by some of these statistics. And according to Stats Canada, and I gotta tell you, these numbers are old, the newest numbers have not yet been released, but we're looking at 8.1 million Canadians who are caregivers in this country, and they are unpaid for their work. And that's 70 to 80% of the home care that's provided on a daily basis. 90% of caregivers do it for over a year at least, and 10% put in a huge, it's a job, 20 to 30 hours per week. How many of you are doing that? Quite a number, actually. Yeah. So 20% actually say it negatively impacts them in multiple ways, especially physically and emotionally. But here's the thumbs up. It saves our healthcare system 24 to 31 billion per year in costs. So our taxes would be even more significant if this was coming out of the public purse. So 35% of caregivers are employed full-time. That's 6.1 million, and they're juggling everything. What are they juggling? Family responsibilities, working and commuting, home chores and duties, financial management, and of course, their own health and issues that they face. But what employers are saying is that this is actually costing them in absenteeism and time off, and the responsibilities of being a caregiver are pulling people out of the working world and costing about 5.5 billion a year in lost productivity. So what does it look like in terms of the Parkinson statistics, right? We at Parkinson Canada actually commissioned an Ipsos survey, and this is what we found out. Approximately 50% of care partners say they don't have enough information or resources. And another 25 say it negatively impacts their career and their work. 60% report feelings of frustration towards the person that they're providing care to, in this case, the person living with Parkinson's, and they feel helpless and anxious much of the time. And 60%, though, this is the other side of that coin, actually say that it provides a positive experience, but that there are negative impacts at the same time. So the national findings, and this is taken straight out of Stats Canada, they say that people who care for or help their care partner or child are the most likely to have an elevated level of psychological distress. And that the intensity of the care is directly associated with a greater impact on the caregiver's health. So it's a positive correlation. The more intense, the more your health is impacted. But it's not all bad news, which is good. There's always that other side to the coin, right? And what we're finding is that caregiving provides a variety of benefits to caregivers, including a sense of personal growth, increased meaning and purpose, strengthened family relationships, increased empathy, and skill development. And as I said to you at the beginning of this, I have learned so much since I became a care partner, that not even just about the experience itself, but a lot about what community resources are out there and who I can reach out to, and honestly, how the healthcare system works. Caregiving has taught me that. So let's define and describe what care partnering looks like. So I've got a little bit of an activity for you. Okay, some people, before we start the activity, define it, and this comes directly from a website called the Caregiver, I think it's called the Caregiver Post. Some people call it, say it sucks, it's draining, it's hard, it's painful, it's lonely, it takes someone special to do it. It can be rewarding as well, and suck at the same time. There's that two sides of the coin thing. And yet it's exhausting, it's guilt-ridden, it's unforgiving. Now, these are caregivers who have posted on this website, but I want to hear from you, and we want to hear from you. So here's what I want you to do. In the middle of every table, you'll see a little tent card that says Parkinson Canada,
If you turn that over, that's actually an activity sheet. And what we would like you to do is this. All right? You'll see there are 3 columns. There's a column for the care partner, the experience itself, and the challenges. Now, I think Stephanie kind of beat us to the punch a little bit on this by giving us our word cloud, because here's what we're going to do. We want you, at your table, each of you, to work together to come up with 3 words, just 3 words, that describe that particular, category. So describe the care partner, the experience, and the challenges. Have at it. For those in Nova Scotia, if you want to participate in this, you can also just do that amongst yourselves on a piece of paper, okay? Thank you. So speaking to those people who are out in the East Coast, hello everyone in the East Coast, and I'm guessing it's in Nova Scotia. Ryan, I believe you're there as well. If you'd like the templates for this, and if you want to run this type of activity or the next one as well, I'm happy to have that sent over. And for those of you who are doing it here presently, when you're done, just hold it up and one of our volunteers will come up and collect them. All right, 2 more minutes. All right, 1 more minute. Okay, just hold it up when you're done, and we'll collect those. Thanks. Okay. So what we're going to do with these is that we're going to collect them. We're going to actually find at some point, maybe I'll write them up on those boards, but we're going to turn them into a word cloud, very much like what Stephanie did. So it's interesting that we had thought of this and Stephanie thought of it. So why word cloud? Because it's something that speaks to us. It's visual, and it is something we can always refer to. And what we will do for each of you that are here today is our marketing communications department will design this into a word cloud, and we will send it to you via email so that you can have a downloadable file and print that off. How does that sound? Good. Okay, because what we're capturing today is the experience that this is for you. Not what we think it is, but what care partnering means to all of you here today. So we're capturing this moment and the feelings that go with it. Okay? So we often don't sit back because we're so busy as care partners. We don't sit back and say, how am I feeling today? Or how is this impacting me? And what I wanted to do today is help you and provide you with a tool to assess your care partner burden. So we have another activity. If you look underneath your stack of papers, we have a nice little booklet. I think you've got it there in your hands. It's the one that's it. Yeah, perfect. If you turn to the next page or the first page over, you'll see 10 categories. These are 10 life areas that we're going to define. And the activity goes a little bit like this. You're going to read each of the statements in the column underneath each life area, and then you're going to circle only the ones that apply to you. When you're done doing that, you're going to, at the bottom, you're going to indicate the number of statements that you circled. So it's potentially 4 underneath 10 categories. So for each category, the first one, for example, if you get 3 out of the 4, then write the number 3 in the empty space at the bottom of the column. All right? And when you're done doing all of that, add up every number at the bottom of every column and put it in your total. And we'll go in. Okay, we'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes to do that. And again, for those of you who are watching from out east, we can email you these tools, and at some point you can all assess your own care partner burden. Now, this is something you don't have to share with anyone else. You can keep this to yourself. It really is a self-assessment. It's a tool to help you identify certain things. And I'll give you what those numbers mean in just a moment with a slide. Okay, 2 more minutes. And one more minute. All right. So for those of you who've added up your numbers, here's what they basically mean. If you scored anywhere from 31 to 40, you're doing pretty well. Your care partner burden is fairly light, and you're doing very well balancing your needs and your care partnering responsibilities. If you scored from 21 to 30, your care partner burden is moderate, yet you're still balancing your needs and your care partner responsibilities. If you scored 11 to 20, you're experiencing challenges as a care partner and require additional support. And if you scored 0 to 10, then your care partner burden is very heavy and you're in dire need of immediate support and assistance. So I'm not going to ask you what you got. That's entirely, something that's up to you. But if you find that you fall into one of these categories where you do need support, assistance, information, and resources, please reach out. Speak to one of our volunteers today or Parkinson Canada staff, and we'll do what we can to help you. We have 2 of our INR people, or information referral associates, with us here today, and I'm sure they would, they'd be happy to help you out. So the buck doesn't stop there. I've got to bring this full circle, right? So here's the thing. What I want you to do on another page, which is page 2, you'll see a table. What I'd like you to do is go back to that first page and identify the 3 life areas where you circled the fewest number of statements. So what you're going to do is, if you scored low on that one, if you only got a 0 or a 1, that's the area that you need to work on. So you're going to place that on that last page. Yes? If you're not working, then don't count it. Yeah, just it's a null and void. Yeah. Yeah. Give yourself a 4 on that one. Just count it as a bonus. Yeah. Yes. Ah. Uh-huh. Excellent. Do you want to stand up and just tell everyone? Because this is great. It's another way of looking at it, right? Thank you. So I'm going to repeat this for those of you who are watching from the East Coast. One of our care partners here said that the work column may be a bit of a challenge for some of us to answer because of the fact that you may be retired. However, she put it into the perspective that there may be hobbies and activities and volunteer work that you want to participate in, and that becomes a challenge because of your care partnering responsibilities. So that's another way to look at it. Okay, so in those spaces on that page 2, write down the areas where you scored the lowest, and you'll notice there's a column that's part of the self-care plan where you identify strategies to improve those 3 areas that scored the lowest. And those strategies aren't just going to come from me today. They're going to come from the Care Partner book that we've provided to all of you here, and they will come from our guest speakers and activities the remainder of today. Okay? Does that make sense? So have you got a little bit of homework or at least something to do after you leave here? Okay, good. All right. Now, don't forget your strengths. I never want to forget my strengths because here's the thing. If you want, you can also identify your strongest 3 areas. And here's the thing. They may be strong now, but what happens if you're now focusing on your weakest 3 areas and you forget about your strongest 3 areas? And there may be a challenge there, balancing that. So the goal isn't just to work and improve the areas where you scored the lowest. It's also to maintain those 3 areas that are strong for you, because those are the areas that will ground you, that will help you find balance, and that will help you get through the remainder of your journey. Okay? All right, so emotions and experiences. I gotta be honest, I did not come here today thinking I'd be emotional, but before we started today, I was. Because for the first time in a long time, I spoke with someone where I was able to open up, and I bawled my eyes out there in the lobby. And I didn't think I would do that. I honestly, it wasn't something I had planned on, but that's what happened, and it was cathartic, and it was beautiful, and it was helpful. It was very helpful because I have my own struggles as a care partner. So here's the thing, we're going to talk about what those emotions and that experience is and what it can do for us. So emotions are a good and bad thing. Sometimes, from a scientific perspective, and I've caught myself asking myself, why do we have them? Why do we have emotions? Why are they there? And if you know anything about biology, they're part of our lizard brain. The part of the brain that was there first. They're part of our limbic system. So that's been part of us, our human experience, for a very, very long time. So why was it put there? What is it there to do? So emotions can be positive and they can be negative. They can be constructive and they can be destructive. They can be inspiring and they can also be discouraging. They can be fulfilling and they can also be defeating. They can be uplifting, and for some they can be very depressing. They can be sustaining or they can be obstructing. They can be strengthening or they can be weakening. The choices are there, and they can be all of the above. It's up to us to figure out what they are. So, here's some common emotions that most people who are caregivers and care partners experience. And they include this whole list and then some. This is by no means exhaustive. But what I want to focus on is guilt. And I heard it mentioned today several times. My ears are always in tune and I hear people talking and stuff. And I want to talk about why we feel guilt. Right? Because guilt is one of those emotions where we're not quite sure, is it a good thing? Does it keep us in touch with our empathy and our sympathy? Or is it a bad thing? Is it holding us back? Is it making us, sort of almost giving in to certain things and not really going forward? So let's talk about that. Has anyone heard of compassion fatigue? Just a couple of people. Wow. Okay, well, this is good and bad. This is good that I'm introducing it today, but it's after this, you'll have your definition. So what is compassion fatigue? It's an interesting thing, and it wasn't identified a long time ago, to be honest. It was only identified in 2002. It's a state experienced by those helping others in distress. It's an extreme state of tension and preoccupation with the suffering of those being helped, to the degree that it can create a secondary traumatic stressor for the person helping. So this is interesting, and I think healthcare providers are at a great deal of risk, especially, for example, nurses who work in hospice. They experience this a lot. People who are missionaries who go off and work in different parts of the country where they see war and they see hunger and poverty and things like that. So here's the thing, there are some root causes to this. Some of us are more prone to it than others, and it's partly because we have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility to others. And if we are that compassionate, to the depth of that level of compassion, then that can make us more prone to it. It's also a lack of personal boundaries, very clearly defined personal boundaries. I said something earlier to someone, I worry sometimes that my caring has become enabling. This is what I said this morning. Because it is a fine line. Where does my personal boundary exist to prevent me from becoming an enabler? It's also a compulsive need to rescue those in need. So sometimes you see it in children. You know, the child who has such a deep level of feeling for animals that they bring injured animals home all the time, right? And it may come from an unresolved emotional trauma, usually from the past. So if you recognize any of this, we can talk about this. But let's go forward and we'll see what we can do with this. There are signs that we can identify in others and in ourselves that we are experiencing compassion fatigue. And they include mental and physical exhaustion, sadness and apathy, physical ailments, difficulty sleeping, irritability or anger, seeking isolation, feelings of inequity in the caregiver relationship. Are we giving too much of ourselves? So where do you start? Where do you start to address compassion fatigue? Well, someone said something to me earlier. I'm telling you, today has been a morning so far of synchronicities. People say things that absolutely surprise me. Someone said, one of my colleagues actually, Mary, may I say this? Yes. She said, well, do you want to say it? The quote? Yep. Fail to prepare is to prepare to fail. And I thought, what were the odds that, that synchronicity was going to happen? Well, fail to plan is planning to fail is the quote. And it was by Alan Lakin. And she's been saying it for how many years? Exactly, more than she can remember. So I want you to remember this, that if you don't plan what you're going to do, and that's what we're going to get into in a minute, the self-care plan, then it isn't going to happen. It simply isn't going to happen. So let's go over that. So you ought to include in a self-care plan identification of what is harmful to you. What hurts you? What stresses you? What makes you frustrated, angry, tired, exhausted, over the top, overwhelmed? Find out what that is and what it looks like. Then you're going to find some activities that will help you build resilience. And we have one today. We're very blessed today. We're going to have someone helping us do some mindful meditation. So I'm looking forward to that myself. Sustainable self-care actions or nurturing. And here's the key word, sustainable. You can't do it just once. It's got to be something that you do on a regular basis. Otherwise, it's not going to have the effect or impact that you're going to need it to have. You're going to define and reinforce boundaries. This is that fine line I just talked about between caring deeply and enabling. And you're going to look for sources of help, wherever that might be. It may be a therapist, clergy, family, friends, whoever you can rely on. And don't be afraid to ask. If you don't ask, you will never know. You'd be surprised by who steps up to help you. And you're going to look at integrated therapies. So you're going to look at physical, emotional, and spiritual therapies. You're going to look at increasing and improving your energy, strength, and mood. And you're going to lead to a whole well-being healing. The thing is, we are very complex, and we're mental. We're a mental species, right? We use our minds. We are a physical species. We are a spiritual species, and we're an emotional species. Knowing those four aspects of the human experience, you've got to tackle it from a holistic sense, not just from one area only. So, A Goal Without a Plan is Just a Wish. That's another one by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And what we're going to do is look at what that looks like. So, you know you're going to make mistakes. Who hasn't made a mistake? Sometimes I sit and I tally mine up, and it's ridiculous. I've made a lot, sure, and I continue to make them. But if we learn from our mistakes and we forgive ourselves for making them, then that is healthy. And I got to give you the example of Thomas Edison. Does anyone know how many attempts the light bulb he made? Anyone? 1,000. You're absolutely correct. He literally had 1,000 prototypes before he hit the jackpot on the light bulb, which is not a complex thing. The light bulb is basically a filament, the incandescent light bulb, right? But he didn't kick himself going, oh, I'll never get to this. No, he made 1,000 mistakes before he got it right. And when he did, the light bulb literally came on. So let's talk about forgiveness. Why is forgiveness important? Remember when we talked about guilt a little while ago? We all have a tendency to, go back up. What I want to talk about, and I'm going to have to go to my notes here, is the word forgiveness. Because we tend to be able, how easy is it often to forgive someone else? Very. How easy is it to forgive ourselves? A lot of shaking of the heads. Now, why is that? Why are we not kind and compassionate to ourselves? Because here's the thing, forgiveness is an interesting word. So in Latin, it's perdonare. Perdonare, believe it or not, if you break it down, it's to pardon, right, in English? But it comes from perdonare, which means for the giving. Literally translated, it means for the giving. Why do we not give to ourselves what we give to others, including our care recipients? And here's an interesting thing too, because I love going back to the origin words. It's kind of like my old, I used to do the spelling bees. Anybody do spelling bees when they were in elementary school? Yeah. And you had to know the meaning of the words. So here's the thing. In Greek, forgiveness is referred to as aphesis, A-P-H-E-S-I-S, aphesis, which means both forgiveness, and here's the other side of aphesis. It means liberty. What is liberty? Freedom. Exactly. So it means not only to forgive, which is to give away, but it also means freedom. What happens when you forgive yourself or when you forgive someone else? What's that feeling you get? Freedom. Freedom from what? Guilt. Yeah. Freedom from a grudge. Freedom from a negative emotion. So here's the thing, and I'm going to go on here. There are a lot of things we can give away. You don't have to give away the baby and the bathwater, right? But you can give away the past. You can give away blame, and you can give away control. And you can give away perfectionism and self-punishment and negative emotions and something that I call heroic ownership. And I don't know if that exists out there, but that's what I call it. I call it heroic ownership because I caught myself, and a girlfriend of mine that I've known for 35, 36 years caught me doing something, and she said, "You got to stop that." I said, "What?" She goes, "It isn't just your responsibility. You don't need to own it." And it occurred to me that that was heroic ownership. I don't want to be a martyr, do you? No. So give that away and share the responsibilities, share the ownership. So I have this oath of forgiveness, of self-forgiveness that I came up with, and it's something that I kind of recite to myself. But I'm also going to leave you with a thought. If you were to write your own oath of self-forgiveness, what would that look like? And I'm going to challenge you. How many people here belong to a support group for care partners? Wow, a lot of you. If you don't already, I highly recommend it. I belong to a support group, albeit not for Parkinson's, but a care partner support group. And it was the best decision I ever made. And the reason it was the best decision was because I not only learned from other care partners who were dealing with similar things, but I also had a venue, a safe venue, where I was able to express my anger, my frustration, and talk about it. Talk about it in a healthy way. So I'm going to challenge all of you, either you do this on your own or whether you do it in your support groups, which might be a good activity to come up with, is to write an oath of self-forgiveness that resonates with you and what you're going through. Challenge, anyone want to meet it? Show of hands. And out east as well, something that you might want to consider doing. So from caring comes courage. And this is something that Lao Tzu came up with centuries ago. But I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. So never let the stumble in your road be the end of your journey. We're all going to stumble, we're all going to fall. The only thing I suggest is put on some really good gripping shoes and try to find your balance so that the stumble doesn't make you fall, but just teaches you something along the way. And there's another quote, and it's in our new care partnering book, and I love this quote. It says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So you've met some people today, and I hope that you have support at home. But if you don't, or even if you want more support, please look to our care partnering book. It was a labor of love by the entire division that worked on it, 2 divisions, I think, Marcom and Education and INR. And it has a lot of information there for you. We hope that it will help you get through your journey, regardless of where you are at. Because every single one of you may be at a different point.